The restaurant was buzzing with the lively hum of clinking silverware, soft chatter, and the occasional burst of laughter. It was an upscale place, the kind where the air smelled faintly of freshly baked bread and expensive wine. Nestled in the heart of the city, this restaurant was renowned for its elegant ambience, impeccable service, and a menu curated with dishes that seemed more like works of art than food, the kind of place where people went not just to eat, but to make a statement. Among the patrons that evening were two women, elegantly dressed in designer outfits that practically screamed wealth and privilege. Their diamond-studded earrings caught the light as they sat at a prime table near the window, overlooking the twinkling city skyline. Their conversation was loud, animated, and peppered with thinly veiled disdain for anyone they deemed beneath their station. "Can you believe the audacity of some people these days?" one of them scoffed, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently on the table. "It's like no one knows how to cater to people of our caliber anymore." The other woman, equally poised and radiating an air of superiority, smirked. "Darling, it's not their fault. Some people are just born to serve, aren't they?" It was then that a young waiter approached their table. His demeanor was polite, his smile warm but professional. He held a small notepad in one hand and a pen in the other, ready to take their order. "Good evening, ladies," he began with practiced ease. "Welcome to Lumiere. May I start you off with some drinks this evening?" The women exchanged a glance, their expressions shifting from mild amusement to thinly veiled disdain. One of them leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she took in the waiter's appearance. His uniform was immaculate, his posture straight, but there was something about him, perhaps his youth or his earnestness, that seemed to invite their derision. "Drinks?" the first woman repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Do you even know how to pronounce the names of the wines here?" Her companion chuckled, covering her mouth with a perfectly manicured hand. "Or do they just hand you a menu and hope for the best?" The waiter's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "We have an excellent selection of wines, ma'am," he said evenly. "I'd be happy to recommend something if you'd like." "Oh, I'm sure you would," the second woman drawled, rolling her eyes. "But let's keep it simple for you, shall we? Just bring us your most expensive bottle. It's not like we trust your judgment anyway." The young man nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course, ma'am. I'll bring that out right away." As he walked away, the women leaned in closer, their voices low but still audible to anyone passing by. "Do you see how he hesitated? Probably hasn't even finished high school," one of them muttered. "High school? Please, he's probably still living with his parents," the other replied with a laugh. The evening wore on, and the women's behavior only grew more unbearable. They sent dishes back to the kitchen for minor imperfections, complained about the temperature of the room, and treated every staff member who approached their table with the same level of contempt. Yet through it all, the young waiter remained calm, his composure unshaken despite their constant jabs and dismissive remarks. But there was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, in the quiet confidence that lingered beneath his humble exterior, that hinted at a story untold. A few of the other staff members exchanged knowing glances as they watched him interact with the two women, but no one said a word. It was as if they were all in on a secret, one that the women would never see coming. As the evening drew to a close, the women called the waiter over one final time. They tossed a handful of bills onto the table, not bothering to count them, and smirked. "Here's a little something for your trouble," one of them said, her voice laced with mock generosity. "Maybe you can use it to buy yourself a clue." The young man glanced at the money, then back at the women. For the first time that evening, a faint smile played at the corners of his lips, a smile that wasn't polite or professional, but something else entirely. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his tone steady. "I appreciate it." As he walked away, the women leaned back in their chairs, satisfied with themselves. They had no idea that their night was about to take an unexpected turn. Moments later, the restaurant manager approached their table, a distinguished figure in a tailored suit. He carried himself with an air of authority, his presence commanding attention without a word. "Good evening, ladies," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I hope you've enjoyed your time here at Lumiere." The women barely looked up, waving him off dismissively. It was fine, one of them said. Your staff, however, could use some serious training. That waiter? Completely unprofessional. The manager's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe a quiet satisfaction. Ah, yes, he said. The young man who served you tonight. I should let you know. Before he could finish, a voice interrupted from behind them. It was the waiter, his tone calm and steady as ever. Excuse me, ladies, he said, stepping forward. There's something I'd like to share with you. The women turned, their expressions a mix of irritation and disbelief. What now? One of them snapped. The waiter's smile widened slightly, and when he spoke again, his words left them frozen in their seats. I'm actually the owner of this restaurant. For a moment, the table fell into complete silence. The chatter and laughter from other diners seemed to fade into the background as the two women stared at the young man in disbelief. Their smug expressions slowly shifted, confusion flickering in their eyes as they tried to process what he had just said. You're joking, one of them scoffed, letting out a nervous laugh. You, the owner? The young man didn't flinch. His smile remained calm, steady. No joke, ma'am. My name is Daniel Hartman. I own Lumiere. The name didn't ring any bells for them, but the seriousness in his tone sent an uncomfortable chill down their spines. They glanced at each other, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate prank. But the manager standing nearby, watching quietly, offered no hint of amusement. In fact, there was a subtle respect in his stance, a quiet acknowledgement of Daniel's authority. But you're a waiter? The other woman finally blurted out, her voice faltering. Daniel's smile deepened, though it didn't reach his eyes. Tonight, yes. I like to spend time working alongside my staff. It gives me perspective, helps me understand how things are running. Lumiere isn't just a business to me. It's something I built from the ground up. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The women's previous arrogance began to crumble, replaced by a creeping sense of embarrassment. The insults, the dismissive remarks, the tossed bills, they all seemed heavier now, more foolish. Still, one of them tried to recover. She sat up straighter, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Well, I suppose it's admirable that you're so hands-on. Not many owners would bother to do that. Daniel tilted his head slightly, studying them. Admirable, maybe, but I wonder, would you have treated me the same way if you had known who I was? Neither woman answered. The question didn't need one. The tension at the table was thick, the air practically humming with discomfort, but Daniel wasn't finished. His calm demeanor only made the moment heavier, each word carefully measured. You see, Lumiere was never meant to be just another expensive restaurant. I designed this place to feel welcoming, regardless of who walks through those doors. Whether it's a CEO in a tailored suit or someone in jeans looking for a good meal, they deserve the same respect. That's what I expect from my staff, and what I expect from my guests. The two women squirmed in their seats, their earlier confidence slipping away entirely. They looked around, suddenly hyper-aware of the other diners who might have overheard the exchange. The once cozy atmosphere now felt suffocating. Daniel glanced at the crumpled bills they had tossed onto the table. Slowly, he reached down, picked them up, and smoothed them out. His eyes never left theirs. You're welcome to stay and finish your evening, he said quietly. But I'd appreciate it if you treated my staff with the same courtesy you'd expect in return. With that, Daniel turned and walked away, leaving the women frozen in place, the weight of his words pressing down on them. As he moved toward the kitchen, the staff exchanged subtle, knowing looks. Some smiled to themselves, while others simply returned to their duties with a renewed sense of pride. Daniel's presence had always been a quiet but powerful force in the restaurant. Tonight, it was more evident than ever. Behind the scenes, Daniel leaned against the polished counter in the kitchen, exhaling slowly. His expression was neutral, but inside, his mind was racing. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. People often assumed things about him because of his age, his appearance, or the way he blended in with his team. But it never got easier to watch people reveal the worst of themselves over something as simple as perceived status. Boss, the manager, Mr. Reynolds, approached him cautiously. You handled that well. Daniel offered a faint smile. I didn't need to say more than that. let them think about it. Mr. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. Do you want me to keep an eye on them, in case they cause any more trouble? Daniel shook his head. No, I think they've learned their lesson. But make sure the staff knows they can come to me if anything happens. As Reynolds walked off, Daniel's mind drifted back to how all of this began. Lumiere wasn't his first venture into the restaurant business. It was his third. The first two had been disasters, thanks to investors who doubted him and partners who underestimated him. He'd been talked down to, dismissed, and pushed aside more times than he could count. But every failure had taught him something valuable. This place was different. Lumiere was his vision brought to life, a blend of luxury and warmth, where elegance didn't mean arrogance and success didn't come at the cost of kindness. That was why he worked alongside his staff, wearing the same uniform, doing the same tasks, not to prove a point, but because he believed in it. Still, nights out like in the dining area, the two women remained seated, now quieter than before. Their earlier gossip had vanished, replaced by occasional glances toward the kitchen doors. The weight of their actions clung to them like a shadow. One of them finally leaned in, whispering, "We should just leave." The other hesitated, biting her lip. But what if people talk? Walking out now would look worse. And staying here doesn't. The first woman shot back. Neither of them had an answer. For once, their money and status couldn't buy them comfort. Meanwhile, Daniel moved through the kitchen, checking on orders and chatting briefly with the chefs. His presence was steadying, a quiet reminder that he was one of them. A leader, but also a teammate. He didn't need to announce his authority. It was woven into the very fabric of the restaurant. But as much as he wanted to shake off the encounter, it lingered in the back of his mind. Not because their insults had hurt him, but because they were a reflection of something deeper, a mindset he had seen too often in places like this. People who measured worth by the weight of their wallets, who saw others as tools rather than people. Daniel sighed quietly, straightening a stack of plates. The night wasn't over yet. Daniel moved through the restaurant with a quiet focus, checking on guests and ensuring that the evening ran smoothly. But his mind wasn't fully in the present. The encounter with the two women still lingered, and despite how composed he had seemed, something about their behavior gnawed at him. It wasn't just their arrogance. It was the casual way they had dismissed his staff, as if kindness was something people had to earn based on status. That was the part that unsettled him most. In the corner of the dining area, Sophia, one of the senior servers, watched Daniel carefully. She had seen him handle difficult customers before, but tonight felt different. She caught up with him near the bar, wiping her hands on her apron. "Boss, you okay?" she asked quietly, keeping her voice low. Daniel glanced at her, offering a faint smile. "I'm fine, just thinking." Sophia tilted her head. "You shouldn't let people like them get under your skin. They don't matter." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know, but it's not about me. It's about how they treated everyone here. I built this place so people would feel respected, staff and guests alike. And yet people like them still walk in thinking they can look down on others." Sophia leaned against the bar, considering his words. "You can't change everyone, Daniel. Some people are just like that." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean I have to tolerate it." Before Sophia could respond, the front doors opened again, and a man in a sharp navy suit entered. He moved with quiet authority, scanning the room with a critical eye. His face was unfamiliar, but his presence immediately caught attention. He wasn't just another guest. He carried himself like someone used to making decisions. Daniel noticed him right away. The man approached the hostess stand, speaking in a hushed tone. The hostess nodded and gestured toward Daniel. The man's eyes followed, and after a brief pause, he started walking in Daniel's direction. "Daniel Hartman?" the man asked when he was close enough. Daniel straightened slightly. "Yes, can I help you?" The man extended a hand. "I'm Victor Langston. I represent Langston Holdings." Daniel's expression didn't change, but he recognized the name. Langston Holdings was a major investment firm known for acquiring high-end restaurants and luxury brands. They were powerful, and not always in ways Daniel respected. "I've heard of you," Daniel replied cautiously. shaking Victor's hand. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure you have. Lumiere has been getting a lot of attention lately. Impressive for a relatively new establishment. Daniel said nothing, waiting. Victor's smile lingered. I'm here because we're interested in making you an offer. Langston Holdings is always looking to expand our portfolio, and a place like this, it fits perfectly with our vision. Daniel's expression cooled. I'm not interested in selling. Victor chuckled softly, as if he had expected that answer. I thought you might say that, but I think you should hear me out before making any decisions. We're prepared to offer well above market value. With our backing, Lumiere could expand beyond this city, franchises, licensing deals, maybe even international locations. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not what Lumiere is about. This place isn't meant to be replicated. Victor's smile thinned. Be careful with that kind of thinking. Holding onto control too tightly can limit your success. We could help you reach levels you haven't even imagined. Daniel's voice was steady. I didn't build this place for profit. I built it for purpose. Victor's expression darkened for a brief moment, then shifted back to that polite, practiced smile. Think about it. I'll be in town for a few days. If you change your mind, you know how to reach me. With that, Victor turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Daniel standing still, his mind turning over the conversation. The timing of Victor's visit wasn't lost on him. The arrogance of the women earlier, now followed by a corporate shark offering to buy him out. It felt connected somehow, though he couldn't yet see how. Meanwhile, at their table, the two wealthy women were still whispering in hushed tones. One of them, Amanda, glanced nervously toward the kitchen doors. Did you see that man talking to him? She asked her friend Caroline. Caroline followed her gaze, frowning. Who was that? Amanda lowered her voice. Victor Langston. I recognize him from a gala last year. His company buys out businesses like this all the time. Caroline's eyes narrowed. Do you think they're working together? Amanda shook her head. No, but maybe we can use this. Caroline leaned in. What do you mean? Amanda's smirk returned slowly. If Langston wants this place, maybe we can help him get it. And in return, maybe we get something for our trouble. Caroline's lips curled into a smile. Now you're thinking. Their earlier embarrassment began to fade, replaced by the cold calculation of opportunity. Their pride might have been bruised, but their sense of entitlement was still intact. In the kitchen, Daniel rubbed his hands over his face, trying to clear his thoughts, but Sophia's voice brought him back. Daniel, you need to be careful, she said quietly. People like that man don't take no for an answer. Daniel sighed. I know. But Lumiere isn't for sale. Not to him or anyone else. But as the night dragged on, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. What he didn't know was that Amanda and Caroline were already making calls, pulling strings in the background. Victor Langston wasn't the only threat walking through his doors tonight. Some battles are fought in the open. Others begin with quiet words in dark corners. And Daniel was about to be caught in both. The night outside grew darker, and the soft hum of conversation in Lumiere began to thin as guests slowly trickled out. But inside, the air was heavier than usual. Daniel moved through the restaurant, checking in with his staff, but his focus wasn't fully there. His mind kept circling back to Victor Langston's visit and the unsettling shift in Amanda and Caroline's demeanor. Something was off. He could feel it. In the corner, Amanda was speaking in hushed tones on her phone. Her sharp voice was barely audible, but the urgency in her tone was unmistakable. Caroline sat beside her, sipping slowly from her wine glass, her eyes cold and calculating as they watched Daniel move about the room. Yes, I'm serious, Amanda hissed into the phone. Langston is here. He wants the place, and I think we can help make it happen. I don't care how, but I want him to regret embarrassing us. She ended the call abruptly and leaned back, a sly smile creeping onto her face. This place won't be his much longer, Amanda muttered. Daniel caught glimpses of their behavior, the stolen glances and quiet whispers, and it twisted his gut. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but this felt different. This wasn't about bad service or dissatisfaction. This was personal. And it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Lumiere and the people who worked hard to make it what it was. In the back office, Daniel sat down at his desk, his mind spinning. Victor Langston didn't just visit restaurants on a whim. Amanda and Caroline weren't simply rude guests. There was a connection here, something bigger in play. He reached for his phone, scrolling through recent news, trying to see if Langston Holdings had made any recent moves in the restaurant industry. A headline caught his eye. *** Langston Holdings eyes expansion in upscale dining sector. ***. Daniel's stomach dropped. The article detailed Langston's aggressive interest in acquiring high-profile restaurants, especially those with a strong independent brand. Lumiere fit that profile perfectly. It wasn't just a coincidence that Langston had walked in tonight. Suddenly, Sophia knocked lightly on the door. "Daniel, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight. He followed her to the front of the restaurant. Outside the tall glass windows, a sleek black car had just pulled up. The doors opened, and two men in dark suits stepped out, scanning the entrance with purpose. They didn't look like diners. They looked like security, or something worse. Daniel's chest tightened. He wasn't naive. He knew intimidation tactics when he saw them. "What are they doing here?" Sophia whispered. Daniel's eyes didn't leave the men. "They're here for me." Victor Langston stepped out of the car next, adjusting his cufflinks as if he had all the time in the world. His smile was thin, calculated. He wasn't here to offer a deal this time. Victor walked in, the two men following closely behind. The conversations in the restaurant softened as people noticed the sudden shift in energy. Daniel stood his ground. "Daniel," Victor greeted smoothly, as if they were old friends. "I was hoping we could talk." Daniel crossed his arms. "I thought I made myself clear." Victor chuckled. "You did. But I'm afraid things have changed." Amanda and Caroline watched the scene unfold, a satisfied smirk spreading across Amanda's face. Caroline leaned in slightly. "This is going to be good." Victor's tone darkened, losing its previous charm. "This isn't personal, Daniel. It's just business. Lumiere has value, and my company doesn't like being told no." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then maybe you should learn to take no for an answer." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You've built something impressive here. But do you really think you can protect it? Do you think your staff can handle the fallout of your stubbornness? One bad review, a health inspection, a few rumors. It doesn't take much to ruin a place like this." The threat was thinly veiled but clear. Daniel didn't flinch. "You underestimate how much this place means to people. I'm not going to let you bully me into selling." Victor leaned in slightly, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Everyone has a price. I'm just here to help you find yours." Before Daniel could respond, the front doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't another guest or corporate figure. It was a health inspector, flanked by two assistants. They moved in with clipboards in hand, eyes scanning the restaurant with calculated intent. Victor turned slightly, feigning surprise. "Oh my, what unfortunate timing." Daniel's blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. The lead inspector approached. "Mr. Hartman, we've received an anonymous tip about possible health code violations. We'll need to conduct a full inspection." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He knew his restaurant was spotless, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about health codes, it was about pressure. This was Victor's play. Sophia stepped forward, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. You can't just barge in here without cause." The inspector held up his badge. "We're within our rights, ma'am. Please step aside." Daniel forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper would only make things worse. Victor leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is just the beginning, Daniel. The faster you realize that, the easier this will be for everyone." Daniel's mind was racing. Victor wasn't playing fair, and now his staff and his entire business were at risk. He scanned the room, seeing the nervous faces of his employees, the confused looks from remaining diners. This wasn't just a business move, it was war. But Daniel wasn't ready to back down. He met Victor's cold stare with unwavering defiance. "You can send inspectors, you can send threats, but I'm not selling. Lumiere isn't for sale." Victor's smile faded completely. For a long moment, the two men stood in silent opposition, the tension in the room suffocating. Victor slowly straightened his suit, giving Daniel one last cold look. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. With that, Victor turned and strode out of the restaurant, his men following behind him. The health inspectors moved deeper into the building, beginning their so-called inspection. Amanda and Caroline exchanged satisfied looks, but Daniel barely noticed them now. His mind was already moving ahead. Victor had declared war, and Daniel was ready to fight. Daniel stood in the middle of the restaurant, watching the health inspectors methodically move through Lumiere, checking surfaces, opening storage areas, and taking notes with mechanical precision. The tension in the room was unbearable. His staff exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves, their confidence in the restaurant's pristine condition slowly eroding under the weight of the inspector's scrutiny. Daniel's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white, but he forced himself to stay composed. This was exactly what Victor Langston wanted, to rattle him, to make him crack under pressure. But Daniel wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. Sophia hovered near the bar, her expression tight with concern. Daniel, what if They won't find anything, Daniel interrupted quietly. Everything's up to code. We've done everything by the book. Yeah, but what if that doesn't matter? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer. The truth was, it might not. Victor had resources and connections, and if he could send in a health inspection at the snap of his fingers, there was no telling how far he was willing to go. Just as Daniel was about to check on the inspectors, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Hesitant but curious, he answered. Hello. There was a brief pause, followed by a low, steady voice. If you want to know what's really going on, meet me in the parking lot. 5 minutes. Before Daniel could respond, the line went dead. His pulse quickened. The voice was unfamiliar, but something in its tone felt serious. This wasn't a prank. Daniel weighed his options for a moment, then turned to Sophia. Cover for me. I'll be right back. Without waiting for a response, Daniel slipped out the side door into the cool night air. The parking lot was dimly lit, the hum of distant traffic the only sound. He scanned the area, searching for anyone who might have called him. A black Stegen idled near the edge of the lot. The window rolled down slowly, revealing a man sitting in the driver's seat. He was sharply dressed but lacked the polished arrogance of Victor Langston's men. His eyes were sharp, watchful. Daniel approached cautiously. You called me? The man nodded. I don't have much time. My name's Marcus. I work for Langston Holdings. Or I did, until tonight. Daniel stiffened. What do you want? Marcus glanced around nervously. I'm risking a lot just by talking to you. Victor isn't just trying to buy you out. He's trying to destroy you. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yeah, I figured that out when the health inspectors walked in. Marcus shook his head. That's just the start. Victor's got more than inspectors. He's been working with Amanda and Caroline. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What? They're not just random customers. Amanda's husband is on Langston's board of directors. This whole thing was planned. Their visit tonight wasn't by accident. It was staged to provoke you, to create a scene. If you reacted badly, they'd use it to smear your reputation. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. And if I didn't? Then Victor would escalate. Like tonight, the health inspection was step 2. Daniel's mind raced. Amanda and Caroline had been working with Victor all along. Their entitled behavior wasn't just arrogance, it was bait, and Daniel had unknowingly walked right into their trap. Marcus leaned closer. But there's more. Victor isn't just after Lumiere. He wants the whole block. Daniel blinked. What are you talking about? Marcus checked his surroundings again. Langston Holdings is quietly buying up properties around this area. Lumiere is the centerpiece. If he gets this place, the rest falls into place. He's planning to tear everything down and build luxury condos. Daniel's stomach turned. Lumiere wasn't just in danger, so were the small businesses around him. The corner cafe, the bookstore down the street, the family-owned shops that gave the neighborhood its charm. All of it was at risk. Why are you telling me this? Daniel asked, his voice guarded. Marcus's expression hardened. Because Victor burned me. I helped him ruin other businesses, thinking it was just business. But this is personal for him. He'll cross any line to win, and I'm not going down with him. Daniel stared at him, considering his words. If Marcus was telling the truth, Victor wasn't just playing dirty. He was planning to destroy the entire community for profit. And Daniel had been so focused on saving Lumiere that he hadn't seen the bigger picture. Marcus handed Daniel a flash drive. This has everything: emails, plans, the deals Victor made with Amanda's husband. Proof of what he's doing. But be careful. If Victor finds out I gave this to you. Daniel took the drive, feeling its small weight in his hand. I can handle it. Marcus gave a tight nod, then started the engine. Good luck. You're going to need it. Daniel watched the car disappear into the night, his mind reeling. He had proof now, but it also meant the stakes were higher than ever. Victor wasn't just trying to force a sale. He was orchestrating a hostile takeover of the entire neighborhood. Daniel slipped back into Lumiere, the chaos still unfolding as the health inspectors combed through the kitchen. Sophia caught his eye, silently asking what was going on. Daniel shook his head slightly, signaling her to wait. He moved toward his office, gripping the flash drive tightly. He needed to see what was on it. But before he could get to the door, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. ***, you made a mistake talking to Marcus. You're out of time. The ***. Daniel's blood ran cold. Victor knew. The walls felt like they were closing in. And now, Daniel realized it wasn't just his restaurant or the neighborhood on the line. It was everyone connected to him, his staff, his friends, and possibly even his safety. Victor Langston had declared war, but Daniel wasn't going down quietly. Daniel's heart pounded as he stared at the threatening text on his phone. Victor Langston knew about Marcus, and that changed everything. The flash drive in Daniel's hand suddenly felt heavier. This wasn't just about Lumiere anymore. It was about stopping Victor before he crushed the entire neighborhood. But Daniel had no time to waste. Victor was moving faster than he thought, and if Daniel didn't act now, everything would fall apart. He rushed into his office, locking the door behind him. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop, the screen lighting up with folders full of documents, emails, and financial records. Daniel clicked through them, his eyes widening as the evidence piled up. Contracts showing Amanda's husband funneling funds into shell companies. Emails between Victor and city officials hinting at under-the-table deals to fast-track demolition permits. Blueprints for the luxury condos that would replace Lumiere and the entire block. It was all here, proof of Victor's scheme. But it wasn't enough to know the truth. He needed to expose it. Daniel grabbed his phone and dialed a number he never thought he'd use, the local news station. He didn't have time for hesitation. When the reporter answered, Daniel didn't waste words. I have proof that Victor Langston is illegally trying to take over this neighborhood. I need you here, tonight. The reporter hesitated, but Daniel's urgency broke through. They agreed to send a crew immediately. Time was running out, and Victor was already tightening his grip. Back in the restaurant, the health inspectors were wrapping up. One of them approached Daniel, holding a clipboard with a smug expression. "We've found several violations," the inspector said flatly. "We'll need to shut you down temporarily." Daniel's blood boiled. Violations. This place is spotless. The inspector shrugged. Anonymous tips can't be ignored. Before Daniel could argue, the front doors burst open again. But this time, it wasn't Victor's men. It was the news crew, cameras rolling, led by the reporter Daniel had called. The lights from the camera swept over the inspectors, catching them off guard. Daniel stepped forward, holding up the flash drive. These inspectors aren't here by chance. This is Victor Langston's attempt to destroy my business and take over this entire neighborhood. The reporter turned to the inspectors. Is that true? Were you ordered to come here because of a tip? The inspectors, suddenly aware they were on camera, exchanged uneasy glances. One of them shifted uncomfortably. We were just following orders," the man stammered. The reporter's camera swung back to Daniel. "And you have proof?" Daniel nodded, handing over the flash drive. "Everything is on here. Emails, documents, financial records, proof that Victor Langston is bribing officials and using intimidation to force businesses out." "Victor, standing near the entrance with Amanda and Caroline smugly watching, suddenly stiffened as the cameras turned toward him. His confident smirk faltered. Daniel pointed at him. "There's your man, Victor Langston. He's the one behind all of this." The reporter didn't waste a second. She approached Victor, shoving a microphone toward him. "Mr. Langston, do you have a response to these allegations?" Victor's face darkened. No comment. But it was too late. The cameras had caught everything. Amanda and Caroline paled, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. Amanda tried to slip away quietly, but the reporter wasn't finished. "And Amanda Hastings, your husband is on Langston Holdings' board. Did you participate in this scheme?" Amanda's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but the damage was done. Her silence was an answer in itself. Within moments, the scene erupted. Victor's carefully constructed facade crumbled as the reporter began listing the evidence on the drive. The inspectors, caught in the middle, stammered excuses, backing away from the growing crowd of customers now recording the spectacle on their phones. And then, the final blow. As the news report streamed live, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Marcus. ***, check the last folder. ***. Confused, Daniel opened the drive again, scrolling to the last folder labeled Personal. Inside was a video file. He clicked it. Victor appeared on the screen, in a private meeting, casually discussing his plans. "If anyone gets in the way, we'll bury them. It's not personal, it's business. They'll either sell or they'll break." The timestamp on the video was recent. Too recent. Daniel's stomach dropped. He realized the video wasn't from the past. It was from earlier that night. Victor wasn't just planning to buy out Lumiere, he was planning something far worse. Daniel watched as Victor leaned in on the video. "And if Hartman still doesn't budge, we'll force his hand. Fire inspection, fake health code violations. And if that fails, accidents happen." Daniel's blood ran cold. Victor wasn't just playing dirty, he was dangerous. Daniel quickly showed the video to the reporter. Her face turned grim as the footage played on live TV. The crowd inside the restaurant grew louder, their outrage palpable. Victor's face turned ashen. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Police cars pulled up in front of Lumiere, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, moving toward Victor. An officer addressed him firmly. "Victor Langston, you're under investigation for conspiracy, bribery, and making criminal threats." Victor tried to protest, but the officers didn't hesitate. Cuffs clicked around his wrists. Amanda and Caroline shrank back, realizing their protection had just crumbled. Daniel watched as Victor was led away, defeated. The restaurant erupted into cheers. Daniel exhaled for the first time that night, the weight finally lifting. Lumiere was safe. The neighborhood was safe. Or so he thought. As the crowd celebrated, Daniel's phone buzzed once more. ***, you think Victor was the mastermind? He was just the front. We're not done yet. An ***. Daniel's face paled. The victory was short-lived. The real enemy was still out there.